Look, all I'm gonna say is, after watching Bad Boys Ride or Die, I'm never going to be looking at a gas station hot dog quite the same. Thank you, Martin Lawrence. What's going on, you guys? James here with another real review, and today, yeah, we're talking all about Bad Boys Ride or Die. A huge thank you to Sony Pictures for giving me the chance to check out the 4th installment in the Bad Boys franchise in theaters for this review. Now, it is going to be hitting theaters this weekend, June 7th, so again, when you see it, let me know down below in the comments what you think. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't already for more reviews just like this. And yeah, if you don't know much about Bad Boys, you might want to play a little catch up before you get into this movie. The added context helps, but I do think this is at least friendly enough for new fans to come in and say, you know, now I want to check out the other 3. But in case you are wondering, well, what's this movie about before I sit in the theater, I got you. So let's get into it. Now, the movie is directed by the duo of Adil and Bilall. We're familiar with them because they directed Bad Boys for Life, and, well, they're rumored to be directing a little something in the MCU too, but we'll see. Now, the film itself stars Will Smith as Mike Lowry, Martin Lawrence as Marcus Burnett, Paola Núñez as Captain Rita, and Eric Dane as the villain, just named Banker. Yeah, I know his real name. I ain't gonna tell y'all, because if I do, I mean, it's not gonna spoil much, but I just don't want to go there. Now, this movie, of course, is gonna be anchored by our leads, right? But there's a lot more surprises in store, especially for a supporting character who pretty much almost made the theater flip upside down. So, alright, the movie, without spoiling much, really is a pretty basic plot, right? For the 4th film in this installment, you got to freshen things up, so they do so in the way of deception, because when former police captain Howard, we all remember him, he of course is no longer with us, let's put it that way, in the franchise. Well, when he's implicated in corruption, Mike and Marcus have to work to clear his name with familiar and unlikely friends. Alrighty, so y'all, let's get into it. We're gonna start with my positives, because the movie itself is one of the stronger popcorn summertime films that you're gonna see. It's enjoyable, and I'm not gonna lie, I think the reason why this movie is as enjoyable as it is because of both Will Smith and Martin Lawrence. Now, most moviegoers are coming for both Will Smith and Martin Lawrence's electric chemistry, and if you are, well, you're not going to be disappointed. This duo continues to impress me. I mean, as these movies age and go on, they both don't. You know, they don't age. They're just so witty. They're good together. They have this chemistry and they gel, and it seems like some of the lines might have been improv, and if they're not, they do a good job of making it look like that, because they are just good at riffing off of one another. And sometimes there's even banter that only works between them and nobody else. They even turn basic jokes into hilarious moments, and yeah, the humor can sometimes just be low-hanging fruit, but because of Will Smith and Martin Lawrence, they elevate scenes. Like those type of scenes where you're like, oh, that joke is so overdone. It feels kind of fresh in a way because of both of them and their characters, of course. And I also love that the movie allowed them not just to be funny, man, right? They're not just on screen to make you laugh. Instead, both Marcus and Mike are dealing with some pretty complex situations individually. They're both genuinely overcoming mental and physical struggles. Like Marcus, he's dealing with a newfound sense of confidence after a near-death experience, and Mike is struggling with panic attacks attributed to what we saw in Bad Boys for Life, where he believes everyone he loves is in danger. And Will Smith's acting, boy, that Oscar was won for a reason, because it comes to shine in these moments where he's starting to feel like maybe he's losing control over his life. We see it in the eyes, and he does a really good job. I mean, Martin Lawrence, yes, he's funny, right? But he's slowing down a bit as like an actor, I feel like. But Will Smith has still got it. So there are some moments that work because of them as an actor, right? Or them as actors. So I think it's great that they added layers to these characters, and it was much needed. And speaking of adding some layers to this film, directors Adil and Bilall make this the most inventive entry into the franchise. They do a great job at keeping things feeling fresh. The action sequences might seem kind of like, oh, okay, we've seen that before, but it's the way that scenes are framed and blocked, the angles at which they take some of the audience into, like, I'm not even lying, there's a moment in the beginning of the movie where Marcus is looking at his watch. Of course he's a little panicked. He looks at it, and then we get the point of view of the watch face. So we see Marcus through the watch face, and I think it looks so cool. It's really fun, it's unique, and I do think that it helps lift the action moments, because there are a couple action scenes that are really intense, but due in large part to the cinematography. And I love the transitions between certain moments. It was near perfect, and they definitely threw the kitchen sink at us in that editing department in the first half of the movie. Heck, even the first 30 minutes of the movie. There's this really cool dreamy sequence with Marcus. I say cool, some things work, some things don't, but for the most part, you would never expect that in a Bad Boys movie. And I even found myself laughing along with some of the most ridiculous moments in the movie, including, well, seaplanes and a 600-pound albino gator. Was it 600 pounds or 900? I can't remember, but it was a big boy, and I loved it. I'm like, okay, this movie, it knows what it is, it's not apologizing for it, and it doesn't need to just go back to its, roots from 1 and 2. Michael Bay did a good job in those movies, but I love that Bilall and Adil are doing something on their own. It's really putting their imprint on this movie, and it shows. It's great. I also really enjoyed and appreciated the switch up in focus on some of our characters. Now, if you remember in Bad Boys for Life, we had Kelly, played by Vanessa Hudgens, and Dorn, played by Alexander Ludwig, and both of them do a really good job in that movie. And they do a good job in Bad Boys Ride or Die, but I would say that the spotlight is shifted away from them a little bit more than it had been in Bad Boys for Life. Instead, we get a heavier emphasis on Armando, Mike's son. Jacob Scipio, I hope I pronounced his name properly, does a really good job with the material he's given. There's even more of a complexity in this father-son dynamic between Mike and Armando, and I'm like, yo, I almost want more of this, because in the moments that we get with them together, I'm thinking, it works, man. Like, I want them to dive more into that. Wouldn't be surprised if they bring him back for a 5th movie, you know what I mean? We'll see. But I really, really think that they did a good job at giving us those instances where, yes, it's an action movie, but it's still very grounded. There's also a single crowd-pleasing moment that works to perfection with Reggie, played by Dennis Green. Yes, we get more screen time with Reggie. Salute, sir, because you crushed it. When you see the movie, you'll know. There's a certain scene, a particular moment where it's edited perfectly, it's acted perfectly, and the action is just something I wanted on repeat. I wanted to see that scene again right after the credits ran. By the way, no post-credits scene, but there's just that one moment that made the audience cheer and clap. I'm not kidding, you guys. People were cheering for Reggie. And of course, I do have a certain type of affinity for these movies because they're set in Miami, and I'm familiar with the area, and I love that they do pay a little bit of respect to South Florida to a degree. Especially with one cameo, DJ Khaled pops up, and I'm like, all right. And then another cameo, and then another one, and another one. But seriously, most of the cameos were fine, but that scene was pretty funny, I'm not gonna lie. And I never thought that, because DJ Khaled really not an actor, but in that instance for sure, and the Miami flavor of this movie does come out to play at times. So yeah, man, it's appreciated. Alrighty, so while I really enjoyed Bad Boys Ride or Die at this point, of course, I need to get into the negatives, because while the movie is inventive, sometimes the film gets a little too cute. And what I mean by that is the fresh approach I talked about earlier with the way that scenes are filmed and the way that the cinematography blends in with the action moments and the editing is spot on. Let me just say that there are some angles that are just a little too jarring and cuts from scene to scene that just don't work all the time. And a good example of that is this moment in the middle of a huge shootout where we get a first-person POV shot with Mike gunning down his enemies, then the gun is flung to Marcus, and we get that same first-person point of view. That is an overdone action trope to me, and I know they try to popularize it with Hardcore Henry, I believe that movie is. You guys remember that movie? It's not good, okay? And I did not love this. It actually took me out of the action. There are some instances, again, where the cinematography works and the cool, crazy camera angles are awesome. The drone shots, they look good. But there are other times where it just maybe is over-stylized, and that is not always a benefit to the film. And when I talk about over stylization, I mean, yeah, that dream sequence in the beginning of the movie with Marcus, that is, well, not the most effective use of style. I can appreciate that directors Adil and Bilall, they were aiming for something new, like we want to surprise you. And I know I mentioned, okay, I can appreciate it. It went on a little long, but I also thought it was maybe a little out of place. Sometimes in moments like this, I could just tell that, well, the film is not the perfect type of vehicle for this type of visual storytelling. Now, we go from that to some of the supporting cast, because I know our leads are great, and some of the actors I talked about earlier did a really good job, but I noticed that the supporting cast can't always keep up with its leads. There are moments where you can maybe see that someone was on set for a day or two and the chemistry wasn't necessarily there, and it felt a little forced. And we find that with a few actors of note, at least from what I could remember. Johan Gruffud, I hope I pronounced that correctly, the politician in the movie, Tiffany Haddish, and Tasha Smith. Do I think they're all capable actors? Absolutely. Even Tasha Smith, she's really good, don't get me wrong. It's just in this film particularly, it didn't feel like maybe they were in sync with the rest of their cast members in their particular scenes. And of course, these Bad Boys movies are known for their humor, right? And for the most part, it works in this movie. I found myself laughing quite a bit, but there were some stretches where jokes were being made and there was just a drought of laughter. Sometimes the movie just swings for the fences, y'all, and, well, it doesn't always hit a home run, because I guess I'm not going to spoil this moment, but there's a scene about soul mates between Martin Lawrence and Will Smith. I'll say that it did not work for me, and I thought, okay, I'm a little nervous now. Of course, the movie redeems itself shortly afterwards, and those two can definitely make anything unfunny very funny, but the writing in those moments just didn't hit, and I feel like the movie was probably at its lowest point in terms of humor and effectiveness during that scene with Tiffany Haddish, who plays the owner of an adult club, I'll put it that way. And maybe it's just that the writing wasn't great, but I also felt like the acting was over the top in probably the worst way. I'm not going to explain what happened because it's way too graphic, but I don't know. Tiffany Haddish in this scene felt like she was in an entirely different film. So sometimes when other characters are trying to crack jokes, it works. But other times, like in this instance with Tiffany Haddish's scene, it doesn't. But you guys, overall, Bad Boys Ride or Die does have enough in the tank for me to say, yeah, you should see it this summer. The film is an enjoyable summer popcorn film. The action is engaging, the humor works for the most part, and Will Smith and Martin Lawrence are great together as expected. And sometimes they surprise me of how well they work together. And it's entertaining, guys. At the end of the day, that's what this movie's supposed to be. Directors Bilall and Adil will keep you on your toes with some visual storytelling elements that really do hit the mark. And other times, it misses the mark. But again, it doesn't bog down the movie, and you're not swimming with that albino gator, I promise you. The movie just is elevated by its leads, its inventive camera work, right? And the action. So while the story is, it's okay, you know what I mean? It's fine. I think it really is some of the acting that brings this movie up past levels it had no chance of being at without them. And I really like the energy in our theater too. This is one of those movies where you're going to want to see with an audience full of hopefully new fans and old fans alike, because there's a certain payoff in scenes if you've stuck with the franchise up to this point. Now, if you're asking, oh, what do you think of it in context of all the other movies? Well, I will say it's probably the weakest of the four, but a weak Bad Boys movie is still a enjoyable movie. So I'm not complaining, and I hope you don't take it that way. The movie has some, half-baked plot, and it doesn't necessarily do much with the story. And I gotta say, sometimes I was just like, okay, we've seen this before in an action movie. But you pay for the electric duo of Will Smith and Martin Lawrence, and you stay for some surprise supporting cast performances and action sequences that'll literally have you cheering, like a lot of people in our theater were. And yeah, maybe I did a little golf clap, I was in the press row, had to be respectful. So yes, Bad Boys Ride or Die will win over new fans and old, and yeah, you need to see this movie this summer if you want a fun time at the cinema. So there you have it, you guys. That's my real review of Bad Boys Ride or Die. If I had to even rate this out of 5, of course, I'd probably give it like a 3.5 out of 5. Again, enjoyable film. I didn't have any popcorn, but I had Oreos, and it helped the experience. I'm just saying, Oreos, if you want to sponsor, do it. But guys, let me know down below in the comments, what do you think of Bad Boys for, no, not For Life, Ride or Die. It should have been For Life though, and Ride or Die should have been the third one, but whatever, I digress. Do you agree with me? Do you rate it higher than I do? I want to hear your comments down below, and go ahead and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Summer movie season, guys, we got a lot more to talk about. I cannot wait. This week is already packed with content, and I just appreciate your support with each and every video. Alrighty, y'all. Well, again, thanks so much for watching, and I'll catch you at the next screening.